In this episode, I want to investigate the nature of the first wave of European Jewish immigrants into Ottoman Palestine. So, I will look into the causes of migration of the European Jews into Palestine. I will also look into sort of the initial problems faced by the immigrants and kind of try and put it into context of the late 19th century Ottoman and European politics. Jewish migration to Ottoman Palestine happened over three different waves, beginning in 1881. The first, second, and third Aliyah was a period of 80 years where the population dynamics of Ottoman Palestine and later the British Mandatory Palestine were completely changed. The first Aliyah took place between 1881 and 1903, where Jews, mostly from Eastern Europe and Russia, migrated to the Ottoman Palestine. About 25,000 Jews immigrated to what was at that time known as Ottoman Palestine and Ottoman Syria. During the 1860s, the Ottomans were going through a radical change. A conversion from public land to private land by the Ottomans was introduced during the 1860s. This was an attempt to revitalize some of the land in the Ottoman provinces and essentially bring Ottoman economy into the 19th century. At that time, the Ottoman aim was to create Palestine a viable economy and essentially take public land into private ownership. In 1881, the assassination of Tsar Alexander II ushered in a new, painful era for the Jews of Imperial Russia. The pogroms after his death were followed by the notorious May Laws of 1882, which stepped up economic discrimination against the Jews. The stirring among the Jewish community, both physical and intellectual, was heightened. Many more of them started to leave, mainly for America, and not a few began to think seriously about Jewish nationalism. Some of them, whether for reasons of sheer physical safety or nationalism, or a combination of both, thought of finding a home in the Ottoman Empire. The government of the Ottoman Empire was well informed of these trends, and what is more interesting is that the government of the Ottoman Empire decided to oppose Jewish settlement in Palestine. In 1881, the Council of Ministers considered the question of Jewish immigration and concluded that Jewish immigrants will be able to settle as scattered groups throughout Turkey, but excluding Palestine. They must submit to all the laws of the empire and become Ottoman subjects. Now, this type of exclusionary practice was not expected by the Jewish community that were so used to the Ottoman Empire being a safe haven for them, especially since the time of the Spanish Inquisition. So when pressed for an answer, the Ottoman government came up with a very bland and sort of unsatisfactory response that the Jewish communities that were immigrating into the empire were becoming an economic burden, so they did not want them to go in an area which was already underdeveloped. Now, an important thing to remember is that most of the Jews in this question were Russian subjects, and Russia was an arch enemy of the Ottoman Empire. During the 19th century alone, there had been 4 Russo-Turkish wars, and the most recent one was during the 1877 and 1878. Moreover, the Ottoman government held Russia responsible for Balkan nationalism and creating chaos within their empire. And Russian-educated and possibly Russian-inspired nationalist movements were a big worry for the Ottoman government. So the Jewish immigrants from Russia, they persisted in clinging to their old nationalities, not following Ottoman law, and essentially looking towards Russia as a protector of their rights, even though they had settled in Palestine, which was under Ottoman occupation. So this added another layer of distance between the Jewish settlers and the Ottoman government. By 1889, there were 22 Jewish rural settlements in Palestine over a land area of 76,000 acres and a population of about 5,000 people. Now, these served as pointers to where the next settlements would be built and how the population would essentially coalesce. These Jewish colonists, they still maintained their European passports in order to secure sort of consular protection, and ostensibly were Europeans in every regard. Now, all of these projects kind of happened amidst the heightened European Christian interest in Palestine. Now, if we take a step back and look at the 1858 Ottoman land reforms, we can see how the privatization of land essentially allowed the buying up of this rural real estate by Jewish settlers of economic means. Up until the 1850s, almost all land in the Ottoman Empire was state land. Private ownership, though existing, privatization on an industrial scale hadn't really happened, especially in the provinces and especially in Ottoman Palestine. By the 1860s, Ottomans were going through radical changes. A conversion from public land to private land by the Ottomans was an introduction of capitalist structure. In order to make Palestine a more viable economy, the Ottoman states created manor estates. The land laws led to privatization and estate formation, which had an impact on spatial change, economic development, population, and immigration. Now, this is sort of where we see the beginnings of conflict taking root between the rural Arab and Jewish settlement. 1858 Ottoman Land Code required landowners to register their lands, thereby increasing the state's ability to control and supervise them. Most of this land was sold by absentee landlords, sort of the nobility of the Ottoman Empire, sort of the elite of the Levant. And these Jewish colonists essentially relied on an active real estate market within this new sort of Ottoman land reform age. And during this time, some of the urban Jewish population of Palestine was moving out of Jerusalem and sort of figuring out ways to inhabit the rural areas of Palestine. And this group of sort of religious modernists saw this productive agriculture as a core part of Jewish modernization and a means of fulfilling their religious values for settling the land of Israel. An important caveat to remember at this point is that Palestine and all these different communities within Palestine were going through a social change, not just an economic change. There was a certain aspect of Jewish enlightenment and sort of an Arab awakening of sorts, where communities were figuring themselves out in new and exciting ways. Arabic-speaking Jews of North African, Sephardi, and Yemenite descent also played notable roles in the establishment of labor economies of this colony. Sephardi and Oriental Jews facilitated land purchases as financiers, translators, and intermediaries, and sometimes as settlers themselves. So, the world in which this first wave of Jewish migration happens to Ottoman Palestine is an incredibly dynamic one. The ancient Ottoman Empire is going through these massive reforms. The Austro-Hungarian and the Russian empires are kind of imploding and turning on their minorities, and these minorities looking for a home in an otherwise welcoming place are finding it incredibly difficult to set up their settlements. In the next few episodes, I want to investigate this further and look into the second and the third wave of Jewish immigrants to Ottoman Palestine and then later on British Mandatory Palestine, and how they essentially became the workhorse of the creation of the State of Israel, how that led to conflict with its Arab neighbors, and the dissolution of the Ottoman Empire and the emergence of the State of Israel. Also, if you guys like this video, please like it, subscribe. I'm very new to making these videos and I'm not exactly sure what I'm doing, but please let me know. What do you guys think?